Good evening to our wonderful audience of the Poets Lighthouse. You are joining us this evening, Saturday, and it marks our 11th episode of Season 1. As always, I am your host, Phynne Belle, pleased to be bringing you more amazing poets and their stories. On our program today, we bring you our guest from all the way across the pond. Lindz McLeod is a queer working-class Scottish writer who dabbles in the surreal. Her poetry has been published by Grain Magazine, Hellebore, Perhappened, and more, and has been shortlisted by the Cheltenham Poetry Festival competition. Her prose has been published by the New Guard, Cossmass Infinities, Wrongdoing Magazine, among many others. Lindz, welcome to our show.
Hi, Phynne. Thank you for having me so much.
You're very welcome. Such a pleasure. So let's dive right into our first question. So I was pleased to come across mention of a shorter prose piece of yours a few months back. It was a piece titled Heavenly Bodies.
Okay, yep. One of my more strange pieces, although at this point I think all of them are a little bit strange.
Yeah, it was, but it was just ultimately so fresh and original. So I was wondering, in cases like this, can you share a little bit with us about the seedling of inspiration and how it incubates?
That is a good question. I often talk about this because I have a lot of friends who are writers and poets, and they will often ask me, where do you get your ideas? They seem very crazy. Where do they come from? Do tiny elves bring them to you at night and you leave parts of your soul in payment? And of course that's true. But really what happens is that I rarely say no to an idea. Whether that's sensible or not, most people would get to a point in that idea and think, well, is that pretentious, or maybe how does that work? I am afraid to try it, and I just go for it and see what happens. So for Heavenly Bodies, I had been reading a lot of more surreal work, and at the time becoming a bit more inspired by that. And I'd been also watching a lot of police procedurals. So the two kind of came together, and I kind of, people are always abducting other people and doing dreadful things to them. What would happen if a woman, and specifically a woman because it's usually a man, and therefore we see this kind of male sexuality being played out in abduction. And I thought, what if it was a woman? And what if she was abducting something very powerful? So of course the sun was the natural answer.
I like that, how that thought process went. And I like how you said that just the idea of saying yes to that idea. That right there is a great way to open up creativity that I'm sure a lot of people would be able to tap in. They're just not thinking of it in that mindset. I look forward to learning more about our guest poet when we return from our break. I'm happy to be back from the break and have the opportunity to chat with our guest, poet Lindz McLeod. Over this time that I have known Lindz, this is the last 6 months or so of the lockdown, I have been fortunate to hear her share a few of her engaging stories as well as poetry. Today, we are blessed to have her share two of her poems with us. Lindz, would you love to honor us, please, with those two poems?
Thank you very much, of course.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start with a poem that is of particular poignant significance to me. I don't write a huge amount of poetry about my family, but when I do, it always touches on something extremely personal. So this is a photograph saved on my phone 2 phones ago. Picture it. The cemetery looks bleached. Detergent edges between the living and the dead. cotton fresh duvets spread over beautified bones. My mother kneels, her back to me, blonde hair spilling over the collar of a padded scarlet jacket, color shocking against the snow, maternal blood. She looks like a fairy tale, the kind where innocence never returns from the forest, where gingerbread trails lead nowhere, where a smell of burning wolf hair stalks around every corner, where a hug is never quite an embrace. Flurrying skies that day, holding back the tenderest kiss of flakes, flowers sleeping bright on burnt toast soil. I study the engraving over and over as the wind picks up. A minor tornado of ice and fluff pushes us together when we'd both rather be apart. I erupted from her body with a yawn rather than a scream. Sometimes I wonder if the universe made a mistake, if instead she should have oozed from me. I'm taller, stronger. I've eaten my nightmares and sweated my hopes out in bursts, while she seems as young as she did when we first matched height. We struggle back to the car, snowblind. She sits, head bowed, with both hands on the wheel, 5 and 7. The engine waits patiently, as I do, and I remember I could smell nothing at all.
Thank you so much for reading that. Did you want to go straight into your next poem, or did you want to discuss that one a little bit before we go on to the next poem?
Yeah, it might be better to keep them separate given kind of what.
Okay. So I absolutely love the idea behind that, how rich the imagery is, and it really did strike a nerve with me. So in this poem of yours, a photograph saved on my phone 2 phones ago, these lines in particular really had me undone. Sometimes I wonder if the universe made a mistake, if instead she should have oozed from me. I began to feel the weight of responsibility of a mother and daughter, or an older to younger sibling shift. Mm-hmm. What was going through your thoughts at that time when you wrote or were crafting that particular part of the poem?
So this is actually a real photograph. Okay. And it is, in fact, now maybe 3 phones ago, I think, because I'm terrible at uploading to any kind of Google Drive or something. Mm-hmm. I will set it to sync and then forget all about it. But my mother and I went to visit her mother's grave. My grandmother passed away when I was about 2. Mm-hmm. My great-grandmother brought almost all of us up, essentially. So she was around for my mother and she was around for me. She passed away just at the end of 2019. She was almost 102. She was 2 months away from being 102, so she did very well. Yes. But my grandmother, I didn't really know her since I was only 2 when she passed, but it was it really hit my mother very hard. And since she just had me, and I think she was finding having her first child hard, and then with it her mother, it hit her very hard. So every time we visit the grave, there's always, it never seems to get any easier. It always just feels like a reopening of a wound, I think. And it had been snowing, and I remember thinking that it was like a fairy tale, and it had all these aspects of, you know, she was wearing a red jacket, she looked very much like Little Red Riding Hood, or like the child lost in the snow. And she's also very short as well. So she had this kind of, she knelt down by the grave to brush the snow in, to put the flowers on. And in that moment, she was just very childlike, and I felt very protective of her, which almost feels like it should be the other way around. But I suppose I've always felt more protective of her. And her sister, who's 5 years younger, has always been kind of the more protective one, the more kind of outspoken one as well. There's something about my mother that she's very small and very cute, and you kind of want to take care of her a little bit, you know. That's not to say that she can't manage on her own, but there is something kind of endearing. And in this moment, it felt like a very intensely vulnerable thing to be, you know, brushing the snow off your mother's grave. and I assume that one day that I will have to deal with that as well. And it just really hit me in that moment, like how much I didn't know about her, I think, as well, and the relationship that they'd shared together.
Yeah, and I could feel that coursing through the poem, that sense of um, wanting to protect someone who normally would be in the role of being the provider and the soother, but in that particular moment they were at a loss, and the role was reversed. Beautiful poem.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you would like to share with us the second one, Plaid, and I believe you do have a further story for that as well, or a continuing project that's tied into that.
I do. So Plaid was originally published with Bandit Fiction, and they got in touch recently to ask if I would be interested in having this poem featured in an anthology to raise money for a particular cause. And I immediately said yes, and it turned out that I was selected, which is very nice, but it's very bittersweet for me. So it is an anthology to raise money for Sarah Everard, whose death had been dominating our news for a few months earlier this year. She was a young woman who was walking home at night from a friend's house. It wasn't even that far, and a policeman abducted her and raped her and killed her. And I always think that it is, you never get used to seeing that in the news. You just never do as a woman. And as any female identifying person knows, that there are always going to be people who say these very unthinking, vile things like, what was she wearing? Or why was she walking home alone, without really thinking that, well, she is a person, and she had every right to walk where she wanted at any time of night. It shouldn't matter what she was wearing, but she was fully clothed and she was walking in well lit areas. And I had actually just started. I was about 2 days into starting a new novel at that point, which had been drawn from an earlier short story, which was published in the New Guard. And it was kind of the same sort of thing. And it just really, I already had the spark of this novel kind of burning in me, but this story gave me the impetus because I was seeing it play out in real time. So I'll read the poem, and then if you want to talk a little more about that.
Absolutely.
So this is Plaid. Luminosity among the pine needles, silken-sided piers. They felled him with 12 flannel shirts sewn into wings, fed him his own wolf whistle until his teeth blubbered, cupped mouth open and eager for more, squeaky clean, good boy, fit for purpose, factory fresh. They take to the skies again, picked clean the carcass of a compliment, and brushed their teeth with scorn.
So, in this second poem, the title itself immediately begs a question. But automatically, when you get into the first line, you are lulled with the ethereal quality of it. But I think this sense of security and complacency is sort of brief. And I feel a sort of menace return. And by the time you reach the mention of wolf whistle, I felt like a shadow was lurking. I felt this heavy weight that was upon my chest. Do you feel that the presence of such dreamlike images, alongside something that's invasive and dark creeping throughout the story, helps the listener or reader to safely navigate the poem, or does it intensify the violence that's lurking?
I think the latter. I mean, I'm a great fan of kind of defamiliarizing objects and imagery, and then kind of turning them and subverting them, which ultimately was the kind of the watchword for this project was subversion. It's actually, I don't know if you know, but it's based on an old kind of grim fairy tale about a girl whose 12 brothers were stolen, and she the only way that she could get them back was if she like basically sewed them each a shirt, and she didn't speak a single word until the shirts had been done. And so for like a year and a day, she sewed all these shirts, and they had been turned into swans. And so she went around kind of throwing them onto the swans, turning them back into her brothers. But just as she got to the last one, something made her say a word. And so the last brother always had a wing, just one wing. But she managed to kind of save her brothers. And I always thought it was, it was kind of unfair that she had to sit and sew all these shirts, and why wasn't their father doing it, for example? Was he too busy running a kingdom or something? But it just felt like, why are the boys getting to kind of, kick down the door and brandish the axe and kill the wolf and do all these other things and slay the dragon, and this girl has to sit at home sewing shirts? But I had been thinking also about the idea of Red Riding Hood at the time, which I'm a great fan of Angela Carter, as you can maybe tell from all the fairy tale poetry, and I like the way that she has subverted things over time. And also Margaret Atwood has done a lot of that, especially recently as well. And I had been thinking, I like those things, but to me they hadn't taken it far enough. So there is actually a grammar, no, it's not a Grammarly, it's a writer's class that gets advertised on YouTube quite a lot, where Margaret Atwood says, let's think about it a different way. It was quiet inside the wolf. And every time I saw that advert come on, I think, but Margaret, it could go so much further. It doesn't even have to be, you're still keeping in line with those original kind of gender roles where Red Riding Hood has to be a girl, and the grandmother has to be kind of a female personage as well, and the wolf still gets to be this male kind of sexual aggressor. But how different would it be if the wolves were female and Red Riding Hood was a young teenage boy? And what would happen if that was the world that we lived in? How would things change if men could see, what we really face in terms of this? If men felt uncomfortable walking home, alone late at night, how would that change things? Would there be laws? If men had to cover up their wrists or their ankles or such, how would that change everything? And I kind of had this, so I'd been kind of playing with this idea on and off, and then I eventually started writing the novel, as I said, just before the Sarah Everard case. But clearly it had been going back as far as a year prior, when I had still got this idea in my head of, I want to completely swap the world at 180 degrees. And I want to see, what happens if we really do that, and what changes. And it's all very well to go into a TV show or a film and experience something for an hour or 2 hours or a complete season. But when you're actually living it, if that's, if you're really engaging with that main character who is you, much like The Handmaid's Tale, I suppose, in a way, how does that change your perception of yourself and what you might do under those circumstances? So, great to be brave from your armchair, but when you're really there, something quite different.
Yeah, that is so true. I always feel that there's still a little bit more pushing to be done. We do have that responsibility to a generation that's still impressionable of young girls who are seeing these and taking them to heart as a role that they should be taking upon. It's funny that you brought up the Seven Swans. That was actually one of my favorite Hans Christian Andersen stories when I was younger. And I was always a little unsettled by that one, unsettled by the Marsh King's Daughter, about, the role being that, sure, they were brave and they overcame obstacles, but they were always doing it still in the frame of being a man's prize or serving a man. So even being young, I don't know, it'd be great if every young girl, questioned it and didn't accept it. I was already bucking against it. I would say, well, that's not right.
Yeah.
Why couldn't it have been, the reverse? So I always left feeling unsatisfied that the story really ended. So, so I thank you for sharing that piece, and I look forward to more stories from Lindz that takes it further. Okay, so we have tread over some topics that have been quite weightier. And I always try to end a interview by bringing a little hope and levity and maybe a little whimsy by asking a last fun but still thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
So, Lindz, if you think of your favorite poem, either yours or somebody else's poem, if that poem were a creature, what would that creature be? And what is the poem?
Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost.
Okay.
I actually have it tattooed on my arm.
Oh, goodness, lovely.
The last two lines in Jane Austen's handwriting tattooed on my arm. And it has to be a pine marten, surely. Something that evokes the smell and feel of the pine needles crunching and the snow underneath you and the cold. Because going for the horse would be too easy, I think. And the horses, besides the horses, the domesticity coming through the scene. You want something that's in the trees, really there, that lives in this wood, I think.
That's a great answer. So good. Now I'm going to reread that poem and have that image in my mind. Lindz, it has truly been a delight for you to sit with us today here at the Poets Lighthouse. And I'm happy to have gotten to know you better through the poems that you shared.
Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Before we conclude, please do tell us a little tiny bit more about what you have in the wings, and just let us know what we can see in the near or future, the next few months from you. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny you should say wings, because I've been joking about writing something dreadful, and then I did write it today. Because I think my work, especially my latest novel, was just so serious and in a lot of ways, and dealt with such weighty topics. I really wanted to kind of kick loose and just write a bunch of insane things over the last few weeks. So I have something coming out with Bear Creek Gazette in the next month or so, I think, which I can best describe as a threesome where one person only speaks in Philip Pullman plotlines, which will make more sense if you read it. And then today I wrote a story about a sentient turducken, which actually I made myself almost cry over, and now I don't think I can eat poetry again for a while. So I've ruined many things for myself there, which is unfortunate. But it's been nice to kind of explore more things. Mainly it's only been not even 3 weeks since I finished my last novel, and I'm under strict instruction from my girlfriend that I must take a break. And I have got around that by only writing short stories. So I'm obeying it. I'm obeying, the letter of the law, if not the spirit, I guess.
You're sly about that.
A little. I mean, she knows, but she's allowing it. I think at some point she might take my laptop away. So
she might have to. And you might have to tell me where to find once it's completed the turducken story, because I really need to stop being in love with poultry, and that probably would be the way to do it.
If anyone is mad enough to print it, I will certainly send it to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lindz. I want to thank you, our very, very gracious guest, as well as our audience for tuning in to the Poets Lighthouse today. If you would like to find out more about our guest, Lindz, please visit her website at www.lindsmcleod.co.uk. You could also follow Lindz on Twitter at Lindz McLeod, Lindz with a Z, and that's all lowercase, one word. We do hope you will continue to support the programs put out by the Poetry Global Network by subscribing to our YouTube channel and liking and sharing our videos. Have a lovely evening.